Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized for up to 15 minutes.
The Senate is currently in a quorum call.
Okay, I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Consent. Thank you. And that I be recognized to speak for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand here today. I've spent some time over the last few days really thinking about this dispute regarding the debt limit, as we're hearing from our constituents around the country that are looking at Washington and asking themselves, what's going on up there? What are you guys doing? And it's a difficult process for people to understand. You know, they elect us and they send us here to serve our country and to solve problems. And yet they read in the newspapers all these startling statements now that the President saying a few days ago that he can't guarantee Social Security payments, others saying that our bond rating might be at risk. And, of course, the reality of daily life, that more than ever Americans are finding it hard to find a job. The ones that do have a job are working twice as hard, making half as much. Things are tough all across this country. They've gotten tougher over the last couple of years, unfortunately. And people have a right to be upset with the direction that we're headed. It was one of the reasons that compelled me to run for the United States Senate, was the hope to come up here and be part of making a difference, be part of putting this country on a track that helps us to embrace all the things that made us exceptional and unique and continue to make us exceptional and unique. So I look at this debate about the debt limit and I say, well, what's the dispute about? Because two things are very clear. Number one, we can't continue to do what we're doing now. And anyone who argues that we can is not being realistic and, quite frankly, is doing a great disservice to the future of our country. You cannot have a government. It's this simple. You can't have a government that spends $1.5 trillion more than it takes in every single year. You cannot have a government that spends 40 cents out of every dollar that it spends is money that it's borrowing. You can't do that. That's not sustainable. Look at Europe. Look what happened yesterday. I think it was Greece was downgraded. They're on the verge of being in default. Why not Greece, I apologize. It was Ireland. Why is that happening in Europe? Why are these countries in trouble? It's not because they refuse to raise their debt limit. It's because people don't think they can pay back the money anymore. The people that lend you money, the people that sell you your debt, they're saying, we're looking at these countries, we don't know how you're going to pay us back, your economy doesn't produce enough money, you have no plan to bring spending under control, we've lost confidence in you. That's the message that's being sent to Europe today. And if we keep doing what we're doing now, that's the message that's going to be sent here to America very soon. And the impact that that will have, not just on our country, but the world, is quite frankly devastating. That's what we're facing. The fundamental problem here is twofold. We have a government that spends too much money, more money than it takes in, and we have a government that doesn't take in enough money to pay its debts because its economy is not growing. And that's why I have argued from the days on the campaign trail when I got elected that the way out of this problem is a two-pronged approach, and you've got to do them both. You have got to cut spending. We have to have spending cuts and spending discipline. It doesn't all have to happen overnight, but we have to stop spending $1.5 trillion a year of money we do not have. We cannot continue to do that. And that's why I support the Cut, Cap, and Balance plan, because it says we're going to begin to cut spending this year in a real way. We're going to cap the ability of government to continue to grow its spending in future years, and we're going to give the states the right to ratify a balanced budget amendment for our country that basically says you can't spend more money than you take in. States balance their budget, businesses have to balance their budgets, families have to balance their budget. If this federal government does not begin to balance its budget at some point in the near future, we may cross a line that's irreversible and put us in a place similar to what you're seeing in Europe today. So on the spending side, it has to happen. Again, people that pretend that we can do it overnight, of course not. It took a long time to get into this predicament. It's going to take a while to get out, but we have to start trending in the right direction. And it's critically important that some sort of spending discipline plan be put in place. And look, I don't want to get overly, I know this is a political place. The debate is always framed by politics. I, like everyone else here, fully participates in the political banter. But today, for a moment, I want to step back from that and just say this. Ultimately, I want to see a solution to the spending plan, and I will welcome that solution if it comes from the White House, if it comes from our minority leader, if it comes from our majority leader. I just want someone to step up and offer a plan that begins to bring spending discipline under control. I know I've endorsed one. It's called Cut, Cap, and Balance. It's out there now. If there's a better way to do it, offer it now. What are you waiting for? Now's the time to offer it. If someone in this building has a better way to bring spending under control, then now's the time to offer it. Don't negotiate in the shadows. All these negotiations that are going on, we're hearing about in the press. Where's the plan? Where's the document that tells us and shows us how you bring spending under control? Because now's the time to show it. Now's the time to do it. what are you waiting for? That's on the spending side. But spending cuts are important. They're essential. We can't do it without it. We can't do it without fiscal spending discipline. But it's not enough. We also have to grow. We have to grow. And that's where the crux of this debate has really gotten. You hear in the press, oh, this fight is because certain people don't want to raise taxes on certain people. And that's really not what this issue is about. I think everyone agrees that we need growth, that government needs growth in its revenue so it has a way to pay down this debt. The debate is about where does this revenue come from? Some argue, well, the way you get more money for government is you raise taxes on people. You raise taxes on really rich people. And I have two problems with that, and neither one is ideological. My first problem is it doesn't work. You can't possibly raise taxes high enough to collect enough money to make a difference on the debt. I looked at some of the tax increases that the President and others have proposed. It adds up to less than 10 days of deficit spending. Even if you raise the taxes of what they define as rich to 100% next year, it's still not enough money just for 1 year's deficit. And so tax increases don't work because they don't work. They don't generate enough money to do anything about it. And the second reason why I can't support tax increases is because it will kill jobs. And this debt thing is a huge issue. It's really important. But the jobs issue is even more important. The number one issue in Washington is the debt, and rightfully so. It's a huge, enormous, generational issue. But unemployment is the number one issue in America. We're talking about people that have worked hard their entire lives, that went to school, that did everything that was asked of them. And now they go out into the job market and they can't find a job. It's especially astonishing among young people. 25, 30 years of age, they went to college, they got their degree. Now they're out there trying to find a job and they can't find one. Certainly not for what they studied to be. We have to get that turned around. Every other problem we face in our country, the housing crisis, all these other problems become easier to deal with if you have more people working, people making money, people paying their taxes, people spending money into the economy. Unemployment is what we have to get at. And you're not going to create jobs by tax increases. And if someone in this building, if someone in Washington has a tax increase that creates jobs, I invite you to offer it. We're all ears. Right now, if someone in Washington has a tax increase that helps create jobs, then now's the time to offer it. I would submit to you, you're not going to find one. Because there are no tax increases that will create jobs. And if you don't create jobs and you don't grow this economy, there is no way out of this debt. You cannot cut your way out of it, and you certainly can't tax your way out of it. Does that mean we don't do anything about taxes like I hear some commentators saying in the press? Of course not. Our tax code is broken. There are a bunch of things in the tax code that do not belong there, and I think there's bipartisan support. Whether the media tries to ignore it or not, I think there's bipartisan support in the Senate, in the House, in Washington for tax reform. Tax reform, we can get done. Tax reform means we're going to look at the tax code, and if there are things in the tax code that are there because somebody hired a lobbyist and got it put in the tax code, but it's not really good policy, it shouldn't be in there. And if we find enough of those unfair things in the tax code, then we can lower everybody's rates. We can make the rates flat. We can make the tax code simpler and easier to comply with. And that's what we should aim at, because that's what job creators tell us. I mean, I swear to you, I have never met a job creator that told me that they're looking for a state with high taxes and burdensome regulations. I've never met one. There may be one, and again, I invite anyone here in Washington, D.C. to produce for us a job creator, a company or an individual who says that what they're looking for is they're looking to open a business someplace where the taxes are high and difficult to understand and the regulations are expensive to comply with. Because that's what we have in America. You want to know why jobs aren't being created? Because that's what we have in America. So if someone knows of a job creator anywhere in the world that's looking for a high, complex tax environment or looking for a high regulatory environment, I would like to meet them. Because I have yet to meet a job creator that's looking for that, and that's what we have. I would submit to you that there is support, there is bipartisan support for the idea of tax reform, of simplifying our tax code, of making it easier to comply with, of, if we do it the right way, of lowering everybody's tax rates so that people have more money in their pocket to spend into the economy, to grow their business, to start a new business. Because that's how jobs are created. I know that all of us would like to think that senators and presidents create jobs. Not outside this building, they don't. Jobs are created when everyday people from all walks of life decide, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to open up a business. I'm going to open up a business in the spare bedroom of my home. or out of the garage. Or when someone has an existing business and decides, I want to grow this business, I'm going to hire a couple more people because I have belief that this business can do better. We need to get people excited about doing that again, and you're not going to get them excited about doing that again if our taxes and our regulations are out of control. So let's begin to focus, with regard to this debt limit, on some of the things that there has to be agreement on. And there are two things. We must control our spending, and we must put a plan in place that shows the world how America will bring its spending under control, and we have to do something to grow our economy. And you ask any job creator in the real world, what are you looking for to grow your economy, to create jobs? And they'll tell you, we're looking for confidence. And we get confidence from knowing that regulations are predictable and easy to comply with, and the tax code is predictable, affordable, and easy to comply with. And I submit that if we focus on those things and not all the other noise that goes on in the back and forth of this place, we can actually start moving towards a solution. The last point I would make is the word compromise is a very popular word around here. And there's nothing wrong with compromise so long as the compromise also happens to be a solution. Because if your compromise doesn't solve the problem, you've just created a new problem. Nothing wrong with compromise. Maybe your ideas of tax reform are different than my ideas of tax reform. But ultimately, we have to solve the broken tax code. So compromise is not a dirty word unless the compromise makes it worse, not better. And too often times in politics, compromise leads to things that make things worse, not better. And if you raise taxes in this economy with 9% unemployment, you're going to make things worse, not better. So I hope that we will rally in a bipartisan fashion around the concept of tax reform, of creating a tax code in America that encourages people to create jobs here once again. Because if we can solve the jobs issue, if we can begin to solve the unemployment issue, all these other issues that we face as a nation become easier to deal with. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hakakan. Mr. President, I have 10 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have been approved by the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak to up to 10 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we're getting dangerously close to the August 2nd deadline. The August 2nd deadline is the deadline for America to increase its debt limit or to face default on our obligations. We need to come together. We need to increase the debt limit, and this is an opportunity for us also to manage our debt. We've been talking about this for a while, and I understand, I think my colleagues understand, that the responsible thing for us to do is to use this opportunity to increase the debt limit to also pass a game plan to manage our national debt and our spending. We need to have a credible plan. Our debt is not sustainable. We can't continue along this path. We understand that. And we have to have a credible plan to manage our deficit. Well, quite frankly, Mr. President, the Democrats have come up with these plans. The proposal offered by Senator Conrad, the chairman of the Budget Committee, and supported by all the Democrats on the Budget Committee, and I'm proud to be a member of that committee, brings forward a credible proposal that has all the elements of our budget on the table. It reduces government spending. It deals with protecting the priorities that are important for America's growth, invests in education and invests in innovation and in infrastructure so we can create the jobs necessary for America's prosperity. That's what that budget does. And it brings about more deficit reduction than the Republican budget, bringing our debt under control. Well, we understand that we need a bipartisan budget. It's not going to be just what the Democrats want. That's what the political process is all about. Midterm elections, the House is controlled by Republicans. The Senate has a Democratic majority. We've got to come together. So what many of us have said in this body, well, okay, let's use the bipartisan Bowles-Simpson proposal as a starting point. That has all the elements on the table, including mandatory spending and including doing a better job on revenues. Well, okay, that's a bipartisan proposal. Democrats have said we're willing to work and come out with what we call the grand deal, the deal that will really manage our debt, and all elements of the federal budget will be on the table as we talk about that. But, Mr. President, there's one option that should not be on the table, and that option is to allow August 2nd to pass without increasing the debt limit. In other words, to permit America to default on its obligations. That's one option that cannot be on the table. And quite frankly, what concerns me, there seems to be a growing number of Republicans who say that is an option that's okay. It'd be all right for us to pass August 2nd without increasing the debt limit. Let me quote, if I might, from David Brooks, the conservative columnist, who said, and I quote, "The Republican Party may no longer be a normal party. Over the past few years, it has been infected by a faction that is more a psychological protest than a practical governing alternative. The members of this movement do not accept the logic of compromise, no matter how sweet the terms. If you ask them to raise taxes by an inch in order to cut government by a foot, they'll say no. If you ask them to raise taxes by an inch to cut government by a yard, they'll say no. The members of this movement do not accept the legitimacy of scholars or intellectual authorities. 1,000 impartial experts may tell them that a default on the debt would have calamitous effects far worse than raising revenues a bit. But the members of this movement refuse to believe it." End quote. I know that the majority leader in the House of Representatives, Mr. Cantor, tells us that there's no compromise that can pass the present time in the House of Representatives. I don't accept that, Mr. President. I think Democrats and Republicans working together in the House can pass a grand deal under the parameters that have been talked about at the White House. But what Mr. Cantor needs to do is to work with the Democrats as well as the Republicans in the House of Representatives. We've got to come together, Democrats and Republicans. But the one part the option that should not be on the table is to allow us to pass August the 2nd without raising the debt limit. Let me talk about the consequences. I've said I believe there are catastrophic consequences, and I believe that. We know that it is likely, almost certain, that the rating houses will downgrade America's currency from the most secure currency in the world. We would be downrated. It runs the real risk as to whether the dollar will continue to be the global currency. Right now, many international transactions are related in dollars. You know that as far as energy, et cetera. All of a sudden, on August the 3rd, we run the risk that the American dollar would no longer be the global currency, having major impact on the U.S. economy. J.P. Morgan tells us that we can expect an immediate increase in interest costs of 75 to 100 basis points. Now, what does that mean? Well, for the taxpayers of this country, it means that it's going to cost more money for us to pay for our borrowing. That will raise the cost of interest payments, which I would suggest are not very productive use of taxpayer dollars, causing taxpayers to have to pay more for our borrowing. But it goes well beyond the federal taxpayers. It affects every family in America. The estimates that the effect of the increase in U.S. obligations on interest rates will have an effect on all borrowing. So if you're buying a home, you can expect that the interest costs will increase by about $1,000 a year in your cost of trying to buy a home. If you're a credit card holder, you can expect your interest rates to go up about $250 a year. That's the effect it's going to have on every American family if we pass August 2nd without increasing our debt limit. If you have money in the stock market, you can expect that there will be a reduction in the value of your wealth. We saw that happen once before when retirement accounts values slipped dramatically. We're at risk of having that happen again if we pass August 2nd without increasing the debt limit. The impact it will have on our economy, on jobs, we expect that it will clearly have a negative impact on our job market. We will lose jobs, and we very well may go back into a recession. That's why this is catastrophic if we don't deal with the debt limit in a mature way. Let me just give you the numbers, Mr. President. In the month of August, we expect that we're going to have about $172 billion of revenue coming into our Treasury. But we're going to have $360 billion of bills coming in, spending that we've already incurred that we have to pay for. So there's those who say, well, we could just pick which bills we want to pay and let the others just go. Well, they say we'll have some winners and losers. Well, I think we're going to have all losers because you just can't pick the winners and losers. There's some who say, well, obviously we'll pay the interest on the national debt. Well, okay, we pay that. How about Social Security? And how long can we pay Social Security? And if we don't pay Social Security, what happens to those on fixed income? Or if we reduce the Social Security payments, how does someone who has planned their monthly benefits, their monthly budget, how do they manage with getting, say, 40% less in their Social Security check in August? How do they handle their obligations? And then what do we do about Medicare? Do we continue to pay Medicare at 100%? Well, soon we're going to run out of money. What do we do about our military, our soldiers, who we all say we want to support? Do we continue their salaries, or do we reduce their amounts by, say, 40%? And if we pay all those, then there's no money left over to pay veterans' benefits. And what happens to our veterans who are depending on their checks in order to be able to meet their obligations? And then what do we tell our students who are preparing to go to school in the fall about their Pell Grants? That their Pell Grants aren't going to be available? And maybe they can't go to school in the fall? They have to make plans right now. And what do we do about small business owners who are depending upon their contracts with the federal government in order to make their payroll? Are their money going to be coming in on August 3rd? Well, Mr. President, we can't pay those bills unless we raise the debt limit. It has nothing to do about increased obligations of this country. We're talking about spending that we've already incurred, that has already been obligated, and now the people who are entitled to the money are asking for their checks. What do we do on August the 3rd? Well, Mr. President, I don't believe we have a choice. I think we must increase the debt limit. I don't think that's an option. No responsible legislator would consider that to be an option. Now, yes, let's use that opportunity to manage our deficit. I still hold out hope that we can get this grand deal. It's got to be fair. It's got to be balanced. It's got to allow America to grow. It's got to allow us to create more jobs. It's got to invest in education and innovation and infrastructure so America can compete. We know we can get that done if we use a balanced approach. Reduce government spending at all levels, including the military, as we bring our troops home from Afghanistan. And yes, it needs to look at the money that we spend through our tax code, and we've talked about this over and over again. We need to have a balanced approach, a credible approach to manage our debt. And that should be our first option. But under no circumstances should we allow America to default on its obligations, causing harm to every American family. I urge my colleagues to put the national interest first, that take off the table the default on our debt, take that off the table. Let's put the national interest first, work together to bring about a credible plan to manage our national debt. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield before I do that, I would suggest the absence